for sure. Well, my name's Josh. If you haven't seen my videos, I do Blender hard surface modeling tutorials. I live in Florida. I've been doing Blender since I actually got started in freshman year of high school. Maybe it was eighth grade. It was eighth or ninth grade. I was taking this AutoCAD class, and most of you probably know AutoCAD in high school. And honestly, I didn't like AutoCAD. The class was cool, like the 3D stuff was awesome, which I enjoyed. So literally every day in that class, I was just using Blender, learning Blender, because like back then I wanted to be a game developer. So Blender was like the best choice to go with. And my teacher was nice enough to let me just use Blender basically the whole time. So that was pretty cool. So I've been using Blender for 11, 12 years at this point. And really, I've just been focusing mainly on education, teaching people hard surface modeling, and just really kind of being more of an entrepreneur and an artist at the same time type of thing.
So when we talk about Blender, this is almost like one of the hugest parts of 3D community today. And I think over the last couple of years even, it became even bigger. It's like there's something going on in the community, something going on in the just public interest to this software, that we've seen an incredible kind of like uptick in people trying to learn it, download it, play around with it, read stories about it, and so on. And my question might be a little bit broad, but since you had this experience working with Blender for such a long time, why do you think it's so popular among people who are trying to learn 3D?
Well, I can at least speak from my experience. The reason I started Blender was because I was a broke high school kid and I didn't have any money. And, the fact that it was, rarely do you find a software that's free and also has the level of capabilities that Blender has. Usually there's like some catch, but Blender's the real deal and it's free. So the barrier to entry is very low. Anyone can download Blender, play with it, figure out if they like it or not. And, eventually if they want to move to like paid tools or paid software or whatever, it kind of provides that bridge. So the fact that Blender is just as good as these softwares, if not better in some aspects, and that basically anyone can get started with Blender for free, I think that's definitely a big selling point for Blender. And that's personally why I got started as well, because back then I didn't really have any money for the other software. I was on the student licenses and things like that. And it just kind of got me started with 3D in general and really allowed me to figure out, is this something I want to continue with or not? And I think that's the case for most people, at least people I teach on YouTube, is they see Blender's free. Everyone's kind of getting into Blender, and it just provides them an opportunity to, see if this is something they enjoy.
You kind of mentioned a couple of things here, and I want to dissect. So the main point is affordable. Basically, it's free, right? So it's a nonprofit, and that definitely lowers the barrier, and everybody can kind of jump in and try to explore. But the other thing you mentioned is that it's so versatile, and if you go on like the official website, there's so many features that it has, and I'm just going like very large scale. It's not just about modeling, right? So you can do animation, you can do rendering, there's like VFX, there's simulation, there's like almost, you can do like the entire CGI film in it. And do you feel like this is a benefit in a way, or is this more like a thing that maybe giving you a little bit too much? Since you're focusing on hard surface modeling, I mean, we can go and say that there is like Modo tools, there is like 3ds Max or Maya or something else available that can do, that can be used for this tasks, right? Do you feel like having so much in this software, does it distract users, or maybe it kind of like a little bit increases the learning curve?
Right, right. I don't know if you remember back in the day, Blender had its game engine, which
Yeah, plus that as well.
They
Yeah.
kind of failed, like nobody was using it, and I think they just eventually stopped the development on it altogether. And I think that's simply because software like Unity or Unreal just did it better. I mean, Blender just couldn't compete in that aspect, and that's okay. So I think it's a matter of, if there's a better software that can get the job done, I always tell people it doesn't matter what software you use. I'd recommend using the tools available at your disposal to, and just kind of combining them all together to really get the most robust workflow possible. So, Blender can do a lot of cool stuff: VFX, animation, modeling, video edit. I think it still does video editing. I haven't used it. Um, but if there's a better software out there, or a tool you can use in conjunction, or an add-on, whenever that may be, to really get the best workflow possible, I think that's probably the best way to go. Because like you said, Blender does so many different things. And when you kind of hit everything, you never really focus down on that one thing and make that really good. There's limitations in hard surface modeling in Blender as well. I've made videos on CAD software before where there's just superior tools at your dispense. So what I've been doing recently is kind of combining, when necessary. 90% of my workflow might be in Blender, but another 10% might be in Moy 3D or Plasticity or Substance Paint, or whatever I'm using for my particular workflow. I can really pick up the slack using other software. So I don't think Blender is necessarily lacking. I think you need to use what's available with Blender and use any other tool at your dispense, and just get the best workflow possible.
Josh, so I don't know if you followed us on, but we actually did a bunch of talks with people who are actually doing just hard surface. I think Warren Marshall, who's a big lover of Modo, he talked in a lot in detail about his approach and so on. What's your take on hard surface? Like, what is the thing that makes you kind of click about this process? What do you like? This kind of content, what makes it so interesting? You mentioned AutoCAD a couple of times. Are you into more like this, almost like mathematical engineering approach, or do you see kind of beauty in these, playing around with metal, sort of like, and creating like this art out of kind of like more strict, I guess, constructions?
Yeah, we mentioned mathematics. I actually have a degree in mathematics. That's what I studied in school. I had a particular focus in graph theory, which, I don't know if you're familiar. Graph theory is the foundation of a branch of mathematics that 3D software is built on. So I really enjoyed those classes, and I don't need, a math degree to be good in 3D, but it was really focused on topology, just the stuff you do in Blender. That degree kind of gave me, at least the graph theory focus, gave me this much more intuitive understanding of like topology and how things work. So, not to like sound arrogant at all, I just think I have a general better intuitive understanding of kind of how the whole back end of 3D works, which kind of helps my workflow. So kind of combining that with hard surface modeling, which I just enjoyed better. I think the workflow is easier. I think it's more fun compared to like sculpting or organic modeling or whatever that may be. I just like focusing strictly on hard surface because the thought process is more in line with, when I was studying mathematics, and it's just a particular way of thinking, I think. And I just enjoyed hard surface modeling in general. And I think it's something that a lot of people, the barrier to entry is not super difficult compared to something like sculpting or, sub-D modeling, if you want to go that route. I think hard surface modeling is a really good start to get into Blender. And I think that's another reason a lot of people have been picking it up recently, why the channel over the past 2 years has been doing really well, because there's just not a ton of hard surface modeling resources out there. And I kind of bridge the gap between like an easy to start type of workflow and also like more advanced workflows if people want to dive even deeper. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you were saying this and I was recollecting about my first experience with 3ds Max, because I remember, I I don't remember the year exactly, but it was a long time ago. So I got this CD with 3ds Max something something, and of course it was all, at the time it was hacked or somewhere. It's not really that I went to a distributor and bought it. So I got this CD, and there was some kind of tutorial on it. Of course it was all in text, no video, and just slides. And I think I was modeling like a jet. And I was so amazed that you can take like a rectangular thing and out of it create the entire thing that looks like a real thing. And that was kind of like, for me, was a big wow moment. And I think for a lot of people it still is like this, kind of like when you take nothing basically, right, and like an empty square, and then you create an entirely functional kind of like thing that you can see, and then you can, you know, iterate, create more, and so on. And I think this is like what the magic of hard surface is for a lot of people, because it's like cars, planes, the things that you see all the time, every day, and now suddenly you can become almost like an engineer or designer that can start thinking about it.
You know what else is interesting, is hard surface modeling, kind of, for me at least, had benefits outside of just knowing Blender. Like, if you really focus down on hard surface, it's not just about modeling or learning how to use the tools in Blender. It extends, like, that's 10% of the work. The other 90 is like understanding visual balance, designs, how shapes play with each other. And what I've noticed is that really getting that understanding, that that natural understanding of visual balance and all these different things that really make a model look cool to the human eye, that kind of branches out into all sorts of other areas of life, like the way you dress, the way you know, you might design your house, or it's all sorts of things, the way you can present yourself and the way you can see things. It really helps enhance your overall skill of just understanding shapes and colors and just visuals in general. For example, I just moved to a new apartment, and I've completely carried all the skills from hard surface modeling to make my own nice modern design. And before, even people starting with hard surface modeling, they'll slap detail everywhere. They'll have like really bad lighting. They won't post-process their work. These are all common issues, but once you overcome those obstacles and you just know how to create a really clean, visually appealing render, that's what I like the most about hard surfaces. It kind of carries out and builds this intuitive feel of shapes and colors and designs. And it's really, really interesting once you kind of master that.
Josh, I totally relate with you, and I love the passion that you're with which you're talking about these things. Since we're talking about this approach and this approach to design in general, do you have some very good examples of like hard surface design that you like? It can be in games, or maybe in film or animation, something that really stood out to you, and maybe you could explain a little bit why. And then we'll use this, and we'll post some illustrations in a video so other people could have a look at what we're talking about.
Video games, I made a video about a year or two ago where you can pretty much use video games. I don't play games so much anymore, but I do use it as inspiration. And I think Star Citizen, the game, let's be real, it's not even really playable. It's like a art simulator for me. Star Citizen is fantastic. They have some of the best hard surface designs I've ever seen. My partner Ryu actually made a video dissecting some of the models, if anyone watching this wants to see that, and just kind of how the models are built, how they're using shapes and inspiration from nature, and just really breaking down like how the whole thing was constructed. So Star Citizen is a great resource, but you have to also keep in mind everyone has their own style. My style is very neutral, sleek, like modern looking designs. So you won't catch me using a ton of colors. I'll generally be using neutrals, blacks, whites, grays. I'll have just very sleek lighting, usually just one HDRI, maybe a point lamp somewhere in the scene. So that's my style. So I'm going to obviously be a bit biased in my type of style, but other, I guess, you have Star Citizen, you have other games out there, but some artists I'd really recommend people check out. My personal favorite artists are Ivan Santic. I probably didn't pronounce his name correct. He goes by Mother, Moth, the letter, number 3R. He has really good stuff. Aiden Garaziu, really love his work. And it's really just a matter of figuring out like what games, what people kind of share your style, and how can you use that stuff to develop your own style. So that's probably, I guess that answers your question, hopefully.
Yeah. I was thinking for myself, the ones I like most, very hard to say, very hard to nail down because there's just so many. The ones that in terms of gaming stand out to me, it's probably those games that Machine Games is building. Those guys from Sweden, I think. They did Wolfenstein. And oh boy, like those guns that they're making there, where it's like this overbuilt on top of overbuilt, and they are like heavy, huge, and all that design in environment and everything is like brutal, kind of like hard surface gore fest almost. And the other one that really stands out to me, I think it's Horizon Zero Dawn, where there's like, it's not really hard surface, right? Because it's a lot of sculpting there, but it is a very interesting for me in terms of modeling combination of kind of like this organic and robotic, and how they created these like robotic, alligators and dinosaurs and all this stuff. That's like fascinating. That's an entirely different take on reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's interesting? Once you master all the tools, you know how to use Blender, you know the modeling tools, you know even the intricacies down to like stuff that's not super important, like miter type on the bevel modifier, or dealing with shading, topology management. Once you kind of know the whole workflow and you just know how to use the tools, it gives you this complete creative freedom to hop into whatever style you want. If you want to go for like a Horizon Zero Dawn style, you can do that. If you want to go through for my type of style, just very sleek and modern, you can do that. If you want to go for more like hybrid, organic, hard surface type meshes, you can do that as well, because all you need for the hard surface modeling workflow is just the basic set of skills to apply to whatever area you want to go into. And that's why I like it so much, because you're not locked in. You just need to know the tools, and then you can apply that to any design style you want.
Josh, and kind of like I want to double down on what you just said, because in studios, really, this is how you do it, right? So if you go to any kind of like work environment, it's not that you're locked into a particular workflow. Of course, studios do have it, because sometimes it's like proprietary technology or some plugins that they have, but a lot of time you do have some flexibility to play around and touch on different angles and try different tools. And this kind of brings me to the next question, because before, one of the big barriers of kind of like adoption of Blender would be that it's not, it's not being used by big game companies, right? They would use something that is, from Autodesk or some other provider, where it's because of the security reasons and so other elements. Do you see this change in recent years? Do you see people with, with remote work and with COVID, it seems like a lot of work is being outsourced, a lot of work is being done on your own computers back at home, where it's not really that relevant? Or maybe there's still this barrier. Can you maybe share your opinion on that?
I think for a lot of people, especially when COVID started, like for me, for example, right around when COVID started is also the time my channel started doing really well and picking up. And I'd argue, I'm just guessing, I'm assuming that's because everyone was either getting laid off, or they had more time, they were working from home, and they were just kind of fed up with whatever work they were currently doing and wanted to pick up a new hobby. And I think, after COVID hit, it really opened the doors for a lot of people to start working remotely. And in the past 3 years, almost 4, of just really hammering out content, a lot of people that I've, coached or taught or whatever, that have started getting jobs and getting work, using Blender, pretty much everyone, either they're working for a studio, and oftentimes even that's remote, or they're just doing freelance work remotely, or starting a business and they're using Blender as part of that business. I don't really know anyone who doesn't have the opportunity anymore to just sit at home, use Blender, and as long as they're good at what they do, provide that value to their company or to their client or whoever it is. Or maybe they're just working for themselves. Everyone's been going remote recently with Blender, and I think the main reason that happened is simply because COVID occurred. So
yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, I think it was kind of like a curse and a blessing in a way for the industry, because of course it was a horrible tragedy for a lot of people, but at the same time it kind of pushed the companies to be more flexible. And even on our end, we see, if before companies were kind of like pushing everyone to go in the office, now we see so much more flexibility, and there's like distributed workflows and people work from home, and I think it just makes for a better life for a 3D artist.
yeah, and people are happier, man. They're just happier working at home. Like, that's the truth.
Yeah, especially in these kind of roles where it's like a lot of modeling. So there's of course advantages of kind of like working with the team, and this is why I wanted to kind of like talk in the next question, because a lot of people are saying that you learn a lot when you're in the office. And yesterday we recorded a podcast where we talked about how a junior guy would just kind of like lean over and look at the senior's guy computer and just learn the workflow, just look at how he works. And I'm wondering, do you feel like YouTube is a little bit of a substitute for that now, where you kind of look at this workflow on your channel, or you Google something else?
Yeah, YouTube's interesting. I mean, I learned Blender on YouTube. I was using Blender Guru's tutorials, CG Cookie back in the day. CG Masters were a big one. I learned from all these different channels, and I learned Blender completely on YouTube. Maybe a bit of Google and forums or whatever. But I think YouTube's good to really get that foundational skill and just get all the information you need. And what I'd really encourage people, and I didn't even notice this myself until maybe a year or two ago, is that investing in yourself, spending money on higher educational resources, that might be for you, university. I'm not a big fan of universities nowadays for other reasons, but it can be useful. And for some people, that might be a great option. The other thing you can do is you can invest in online courses, whoever that might be with. Maybe there's a specific mentor you like. He has some programs. Go buy the program. You're going to get so much more information, spending a bit of money and just really having this, you might get decades of experience from someone, just investing 50, 100, 200 bucks into a program that they have developed. Then you're just not going to get the same level of quality on YouTube as a completely structured curriculum that someone really sat down and spent time developing. So YouTube's great. What I think is even greater, and even for me with my business, I've spent so much money recently in coaching and attending events and attending seminars. And the ROI on investing in these things, yes, I had to spend a lot of money up front, but the ROI you get in terms of knowledge and how much that expedites and saves you time is completely invaluable. It's, I recently attended a conference for the provider I use for our website. It's a lot of business owners. I spent $1,000 to attend, and I easily got $20,000 to $30,000 worth of information and value from it easily. And I think the same thing can happen for people learning Blender or 3D or anything, is use YouTube to kind of get that foundation. But if you're serious about it, you need to dive deeper and find someone you like and that you trust, see if they have any programs, and just invest a bit of money into those. And the amount of ROI you're going to get is absolutely insane. That's been my experience. And I think it's the same for a lot of people that have actually, invested some money into different things like that. They get a lot higher ROI compared to something like YouTube.
Josh, thank you for that. And yeah, I kind of have to agree with you because there are so many schools, and we work with so many great schools where it's not even that expensive. Like if you compare it with a traditional university, where you need to take a student loan, and it's this crippling debt, you can spend like $600 or like $1,000 and get a very solid course and just use it as a like a base, and then build on top of it and move forward. And I kind of have a question related to that. So we talked a little bit about education and the way to pay for it and get great value, or just kind of like watching it on YouTube or Googling it and so on. And this kind of brings us to this question, which I'm sure you're getting a lot, is, you know, that there are experiments where you just, you know, use an algorithms or some machine learning, and it just spits out a model for you. Like it looks at a bunch of, you know, stuff, and then it creates a kettle or something else, you know, a chair. What's your take on this? Like, how do you feel these new developments are they gonna benefit the industry? Are they gonna benefit the modeler in general? Or is this something that we should be kind of cautious of?
Yeah, I was actually talking about this recently. I was in Austin about a month ago. I was with Chip Walters and Master Xeon, the developer of Hard Ops. We had a lunch together. We were actually discussing this a bit, and they were both bringing up, you know, similar concerns that, you know, there's very well going to be a point where you type in some, what, like Photoshop's doing it now. You type in some letters or sentences or whatever, and it spits out exactly what you want. I mean, who's to say sometime in the future I can't type in, design me a sci-fi rocket ship with 3 propellers and whatever else, and it spits that out in 5 seconds. I understand that's a real concern, and it's definitely something that's probably going to happen. My take on this whole thing is I'm just rolling with the punches. What's going to happen, like, you have 2 different groups of people. You have these people who just give up and say, oh, this whole AI stuff is going to take over. There's no point starting. And it's basically a loser's mindset. I don't accept that. The way I work is I adapt to whatever technology is coming out. I mean, there's so much technology I've been using recently, Chat GPT, of course, the Photoshop AI stuff, like all this stuff has not been destroying my workflow. It's been enhancing it. And it's the way you think about it. You know, you can have the doom and gloom mindset where it's just going to take over and you're not going to be able to do anything with 3D, or you can roll with the punches, figure out what's coming and just adapt to it. Figure out, how can I use these tools, even if it might hurt me in my industry, it might take me over or whatever. How can I use that and become the best at something else using those tools so I'm still just as valuable? That's the way I think about it. I'm not concerned at all because I enjoy a bit of a challenge. I enjoy when things come out that can actually help my workflow, even though to a pessimist, it might seem like, oh, this is just going to replace me. So I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, I can see the technology advancing very quickly, but I'm excited to start using it and using it to enhance my workflow, not to destroy it.
I love this answer, and I have an analogy from photography. There are basically 2 ways of looking at it, right? So when digital photography kind of came, all the people who with analog cameras were saying like, look, this is not real, you know, this is like not true photography. Just like ages before that, people were saying the same about photography and like painting, right? But if you go online now, you will see like there's like tons of people who are using old cameras, old film cameras, and they're capturing this, and then they're using like some very expensive like Sony cameras to scan the negative, put it in Photoshop, apply some kind of like, and so on. And there's a cautionary, it's sort of like an inspiring thing. I don't want to say that traditional modeling is going to become like analog photography, but there's also a cautionary tale there where a company, Kodak, which actually kind of developed one of the first prototypes of digital cameras, it never really, you know, it never really jumped the gun, and kind of like they never really developed it into a product. and never really stuck with it. And whereas Kodak now, right, they're selling analog, film right now. But at the same time, a company like Fuji, who started in the same kind of like pool, right now they're like super successful. They're selling digital cameras, and they are using a lot of that know-how from their analog days, still developing and building film for analog cameras. They're still integrating that into their digital products, and I think this is something that's gonna happen eventually. That as an art form, I don't think modeling is gonna be gone. I don't think that people would just rely on algorithms or machines to create something for themselves. I don't feel like ever you would see Ferrari or somebody saying like, no, this is like a more efficient design, because this is like not about, like, humans are irrational. Like, we're not really into these things. But at the same time, I do feel like I agree with you that it's just going to be like a part of the workflow, and you just have to stick with it and try to figure out a way how to use it for your benefit.
Yeah, exactly. It's all a mindset thing. It's just a matter of how you perceive it. I mean, there's pretty much, you could argue for pretty much any industry, accounting, design, or just, those checkout clerks at a grocery store, right? Like, you can argue that pretty much any of these people would be replaced. And I'd argue they're not going to be replaced. They're just going to adapt to new things that come about. If you're just going to accept failure and defeat from technology, I mean, that's just a really bad mindset to have. I'd rather just focus on the optimal side of things and how I can use this technology to make my life easier, because that's essentially what's going to happen.
Josh, so to kind of like end up on an optimistic note, what kind of advice would you give to a person who, as yourself, once was a student and they wanted to learn more a little bit about 3D modeling and computer graphics in general? What are like the 3 things they need to do in order to get better?
Well, I could use the normal cliche, work hard, don't give up type of thing, but I think that's a bit useless because everyone's saying that. I think the best thing you can do realistically is have a good positive mindset. Really, read self-help books, go to the gym, do things that put your mind in a much more optimistic place where you don't feel depressed. You feel happy, you feel excited to work, you're energetic, you don't have brain fog. These things that I started incorporating, the good habits over the past few years, I feel amazing. I've been eating better. A lot of that brain fog has gone away, allowing me to really focus on what I want to do. I get excited to go work out because it makes me feel good. And all these different types of things, just general mental and physical, apply easily to someone learning 3D because they're already in a good mood. They already feel good. They're already excited to learn, versus someone who just has a really weak mindset. The moment they hit a minor roadblock, what are they going to do? They're just going to quit. That's usually what happens. They have this negative, pessimistic mindset. So the moment they run into something difficult, they can't overcome it. They haven't built their mind to where it needs to be. So the first thing you can do is really just work on mindset, because everyone at some point doesn't have the best mindset. And over time, it's something that you can just improve on. So now, whenever I hit roadblocks, whether it's, financially or within 3D, whatever it may be, I always have a positive outlook in it, because that's just kind of how I've been training my mind over the past few years, like self-development, right? So I think that's the number one thing a lot of people can do, because it's very easy for us as 3D artists to sit at home. We're kind of anxious. We don't talk to a lot of people. We don't get a lot of sunlight. It's very easy for us to fall into that trap. So I think just taking those steps to improve your mind is number one. Number two is there's no shortcut, right? Like, you have to consistently show up and do the work. I mean, the work needs doing. There's no way around it. People want to be like, I'll see people start Blender for a month and then they'll start posting gigs on Fiverr and they'll wonder why they're not getting any clients. Well, brother, you don't know marketing. You don't know how to make a good looking design. You don't know your lighting. You don't know your rendering. You're unconfident. All these things compound, and it makes you feel like a loser, when in reality, you just haven't put in enough work yet, right? It's so that's the number one or number two thing. You really need to put in the work and be consistent with it, and just keep training, keep learning, keep improving your skills. That's number two. And number three, I think, would be you need to figure out like what area you want to focus on, because I make tutorials kind of for me 4 years ago, knowing what I would want, but you might not want the same thing as me. So figure out how whatever you're learning, whether it's the tools or the software, how can you use what you're learning and apply it to your own style and apply it to whatever you're trying to do specifically. If you want to work at a studio, you're going to need to take a different approach to someone who wants to become an entrepreneur, for example, and teach people. You need to figure out, what steps you need to take to get you to that particular goal, and don't just follow someone mindlessly, right? So I think those are the big three.
Josh, thank you so much for your time. We're almost out of it. We'll leave the links in the description to your channel and to your website so people can check out. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.